interdisciplina. Personas que proyectan su desarrollo hacia el bien común. Nuevo modelo formativo Finis transforma. Universidad Finis Terrae. Para los desafíos de un mundo en constante cambio, se necesita una formación integral. Por eso, integramos las artes y las humanidades. Aquí, la carrera comienza con un proyecto de vida. Desarrollamos el pensamiento crítico para dialogar con la complejidad. Aprendemos a comunicar ideas con impacto y creatividad. Porque los grandes problemas se abordan desde múltiples perspectivas. Se pueden elegir minors que amplían nuestra visión profesional. Fomentamos experiencias internacionales y el intercambio global. Y herramientas para construir una carrera con proyección. Para ser profesionales autónomos que gestionan su propia trayectoria. Formamos profesionales de excelencia, personas integrales. Profesionales que transformen la realidad. Con propósito, flexibilidad, interdisciplina. Personas que proyectan su desarrollo hacia el bien común. Nuevo modelo formativo Finis transforma. Universidad Finis Terrae. Para los desafíos de un mundo en constante cambio, se necesita una formación integral. Por eso, integramos las artes y las humanidades. Aquí, la carrera comienza con un proyecto de vida. Desarrollamos el pensamiento crítico para dialogar con la complejidad. Aprendemos a comunicar ideas con impacto y creatividad. Porque los grandes problemas se abordan desde múltiples perspectivas. Se pueden elegir minors que amplían nuestra visión profesional. Fomentamos experiencias internacionales y el intercambio global. Y herramientas para construir una carrera con proyección. Para ser profesionales autónomos que gestionan su propia trayectoria. Formamos profesionales de excelencia, personas integrales. Profesionales que transformen la realidad. Con propósito, flexibilidad, interdisciplina. Personas que proyectan su desarrollo hacia el bien común. Nuevo modelo formativo Finis transforma. Universidad Finis Terrae. Para los desafíos de un mundo en constante cambio, se necesita una formación integral. Por eso, integramos las artes y las humanidades. Aquí, la carrera comienza con un proyecto de vida. Desarrollamos el pensamiento crítico para dialogar con la complejidad. Aprendemos a comunicar ideas con impacto y creatividad. Porque los grandes problemas se abordan desde múltiples perspectivas. Se pueden elegir minors que amplían nuestra visión profesional. Fomentamos experiencias internacionales y el intercambio global. Y herramientas para construir una carrera con proyección. Para ser profesionales autónomos que gestionan su propia trayectoria. Formamos profesionales de excelencia, personas integrales. Profesionales que transformen la realidad. Con propósito, flexibilidad, interdisciplina. Personas que proyectan su desarrollo hacia el bien común. Nuevo modelo formativo Finis transforma. Universidad Finis Terrae. Para los desafíos de un mundo en constante cambio, se necesita una formación integral. Por eso, integramos las artes y las humanidades. Aquí, la carrera comienza con un proyecto de vida. Desarrollamos el pensamiento crítico para dialogar con la complejidad. Aprendemos a comunicar ideas con impacto y creatividad. Porque los grandes problemas se abordan desde múltiples perspectivas. Se pueden elegir minors que amplían nuestra visión profesional. Fomentamos experiencias.
Muy buenos días, sean todos y todas bienvenidos al Foro Internacional Protección y conservación del patrimonio arqueológico en paisajes abiertos, organizados por la Universidad Finis Terrae en colaboración con especialistas nacionales e internacionales y con la participación de ICOM-CC. Este foro convoca la reflexión y el diálogo en torno a la investigación y la práctica patrimonial en paisajes abiertos, abordando no solo los geoglifos, sino también los museos de sitio, la conservación preventiva, la educación patrimonial y el monitoreo participativo. El norte andino alberga conjuntos arqueológicos de enorme valor. En particular, la región de Tarapacá concentra casos emblemáticos como Cerro Unita, donde se emplaza el Gigante de Tarapacá y los geoglifos de Pintados. Estos sitios constituyen un verdadero laboratorio para debatir los desafíos de conservación in situ en entornos hiperáridos, la gestión del tránsito motorizado y la educación para una visita responsable. Vamos a partir con las palabras de Johanna Taylor, académica de la Universidad de Chile y también miembro activa de ICOM-CC Internacional, que va a ser las palabras de remarca de Andrés Echeverría, y finalmente yo voy a hacer unas palabras en inglés para los miembros conectados online. Joana, por favor.
Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everybody. A mí me escribió Andrés que hoy día se trasladan los textiles de la basura hacia el Gigante Vestido y que no podía estar hoy día, y me mandó un texto para que yo hable lo que él iba a hablar. Así que lo voy a leer. Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Quiero comenzar dando una cordial bienvenida a quienes hoy nos acompañan en este Foro Internacional, Protección y conservación del patrimonio arqueológico en países abiertos. Es un honor contar con la presencia de especialistas, investigadores, conservadores, académicos y estudiantes, y representantes de distintas universidades y otras instituciones, todos expertos en área clave para el tema que hoy nos convoca. Su presencia aquí no es casual. Este foro nace precisamente desde la convicción de que la protección del patrimonio arqueológico no puede ni debe abordarse desde una sola disciplina, sino desde cruce de saberes, experiencias y miradas críticas que permitan construir respuestas complejas frente a los problemas complejos. Este encuentro es organizado por la Universidad Finis Terrae, es en colaboración con ICOM-CC, a quienes agradecemos profundamente su compromiso y por creer en la importancia de generar este espacio de reflexión, diálogo y acción conjunta. El proyecto El Gigante Vestido nace justamente para abrir conversaciones como esta, no como una respuesta cerrada, sino como una pregunta abierta al territorio, a la comunidad y a los especialistas. Invita a debatir desde una mirada multidisciplinaria, donde las distintas visiones de expertos nos permiten comprender mejor que las directrices deberíamos tomar para salvaguardar nuestro patrimonio arqueológico, tanto frente a las acciones antrópicas como frente a los crecientes efectos del cambio climático. Creemos firmemente que las conclusiones que emergen de este foro no se agotarán en esta jornada. Por el contrario, serán insumos fundamentales para seguir investigando, reflexionando sobre cómo desde la arquitectura y desde otras disciplinas podemos aportar efectivamente a la protección del patrimonio invaluable, que no nos pertenece solo a nosotros, sino también, sobre todo, a generaciones futuras. En este contexto resulta inevitable preguntarnos cuál es hoy el rol de la universidad. Creemos que la universidad no puede limitarse únicamente a la transmisión de conocimientos, sino que debe ser un espacio activo de pensamientos críticos, capaz de vincularse con el territorio, con la conflicción real de la sociedad, con los desafíos urgentes de nuestro tiempo. La universidad debe ser un lugar donde las preguntas incómodas tengan cabida, donde se fomenta reflexión ética y donde el conocimiento se ponga al servicio del bien común. Desde esta perspectiva, también es necesario reflexionar sobre el rol de la arquitectura en la actualidad. La arquitectura es mucho más que construir casa o edificio. La arquitectura, gracias a nuestra capacidad de articular y asociar múltiples variables sociales, culturales, ambientales y técnicos, simbólicas, y debemos asumir un rol de liderazgo en equipo multidisciplinario. La arquitectura no puede entenderse únicamente como la producción de objetos edificados. Desde sus fundamentos disciplinarios, su quehacer esencial ha sido la traducción de lo abstracto en material, es decir, la capacidad de transformar ideas, valores y sistemas de relación en forma construida. En este sentido, el rol de la arquitectura no ha cambiado. Materializado, el abstracto ha sido siempre lo esencial en la práctica arquitectónica. En este acto central en todo proceso creativo constituye la esencial profunda de la arquitectura. El arquitecto opera como mediador entre distintos sistemas de conocimientos, articulando dimensiones sociales, culturales, técnicos, ambientales y simbólicos, y sintetizándolas en una propuesta material coherente. La arquitectura, entendida así, no es solo un resultado formal, sino un proceso de transcripción disciplinaria, mediante el cual una idea adquiere estructura, cuerpo, presencia en el territorio. Esta capacidad de mediación y síntesis resulta particularmente relevante cuando se orienta hacia la protección del patrimonio, la comprensión del paisaje, la preservación de la memoria colectiva, ámbitos en los que la arquitectura puede actuar como un instrumento crítico y operativo al servicio del bien común. El Gigante Vestido surge precisamente de este lugar. Se inició desde lo más intangible que existe, un sueño. Y hoy esto pronto a ser materializado. ¿Y qué pasó en el camino? Pasaron casi 4 años en lo que hemos tejido una red de amistades, colaboradores y voluntades personales, profundamente interesados en su territorio. Muchas veces desde una perspectiva y económicamente desinteresable, para éticamente comprometidos. Junto a mi socia Victoria, tenemos recorrido este camino largo, en muchos momentos algo gigantesco, un camino lleno de dificultades, pero también lleno de esperanza, como la convicción, quizás ingenua, pero sincero, de que este posible aporte a un pequeño gran área a nuestra sociedad. Donde niño me he interesado profundamente el desierto, un paisaje vasto, silencioso y sumamente misterioso, un territorio donde las huellas y muestras antepasados se manifiestan en asentamientos humanos, en pictolifos y en geolifos, pero lo que más me conmueve es paisaje dibujado, trazado por geoglifos, que ayudaban al hombre carbanero circular por un territorio inmenso y aparentemente desolado, pero profundamente referencia y significado. Hoy, lamentablemente, este mismo territorio lo estamos llenando de basura, de olvido, de indiferencia. Hablar de patrimonio es hablar de responsabilidad internacional. Es preguntarnos qué mundo queremos entregar, qué huellas queremos dejar. Patrimonio no es solo el pasado, es el vínculo con lo que precisamos y lo que somos capaces de transmitir. ¿Qué ocurre en una sociedad cuando huellas desaparecen por nuestro destruido? ¿Qué perdemos cuando el paisaje deja de contarnos historias? Tal vez sea necesario recordar algunos simples, pero esenciales. Solo estamos de paso. Nuestra existencia es apenas un gramo de arena, más que en el desierto. Si lo compartimos con la inmensidad del tiempo que has modelado el lugar. Y por eso quiero cerrar con una reflexión sencilla pero profunda. ¿Qué recibimos y qué estamos dejando? Muchas gracias.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this International Forum on the Protection and Conservation of Archaeological Heritage in Open Landscapes. I would like to begin by sincerely thanking the academic authorities and institutional representatives who are joining us today, as well as our hosts at Universidad Finis Terrae for opening their doors and supporting their important gathering. I would also like to warmly welcome our invited speakers, researchers, professionals, students, representatives of local communities, and all of those who are joining us both here in Santiago and online from different parts of the world. Your presence today reflects a shared concern and commitment to the future of archaeological heritage in vulnerable and transforming landscapes. This forum emerges from a very specific context, but it addresses challenges that are undeniably global. It originates from the project El Gigante Vestido, a large-scale art territorial research initiative developed in Tarapacá region in northern Chile by me and Andrés Echeverría, centered around the Gigante Tarapacá geoglyph. From its early stages, this project confronted us with a critical intersection: the protection of archaeological heritage on the one hand, and the environmental crisis affecting the same territories on the other. Rather than treating these issues as separate, El Gigante Vestido understands them as deeply interconnected. The degradation of landscapes, the pressures of extractive economies, the impacts of climate change, and the accumulation of waste all directly affect the material and symbolic integrity of archaeological sites. This realization led us to a fundamental question: how can we rethink conservation practices in open landscapes that are increasingly exposed, fragile, and contested? This forum was conceived as a space to address that question collectively. Its purpose is not to provide definitive answers, but to create a platform for dialogue, for the exchange of experiences, methodologies, and critical perspectives across disciplines and territories. Archaeology, conservation, architecture, art, landscape studies, governance, ethics, and community participation all come together here, because none of these fields on their own can respond adequately to the complexity of the challenges we face. Throughout today's sessions, we will expose different approaches to preventive conservation, rock art and stone surfaces, open-air museums, and governance and ethical frameworks. What connects these discussions is a shared understanding that conservation today must move beyond technical solutions alone. It must engage with social, environmental, and cultural dimensions, and it must be rooted in respect for local context and communities. We are especially honored to hold this forum in collaboration with ICOM-CC. This partnership reinforces the importance of international cooperation in addressing heritage protection, particularly in regions where archaeological sites exist outside controlled or enclosed environments. The involvement of ICOM-CC situates this forum within a broader global conversation, reminding us that what happens in places like Tarapacá resonates far beyond national borders. In this context, it is a true honor to welcome Kate Seymour, Chair of ICOM-CC, and Joanna Taylor, along with the national and international experts who have generously agreed to participate in this forum. Your contributions bring invaluable perspectives and strengthen the collective reflection we aim to foster today. Ultimately, this forum is an invitation to listen carefully to territories, to communities, and to diverse forms of knowledge, and also to reflect critically on our own roles as professionals, institutions, and decision-makers. The protection of archaeological heritage in open landscapes is not only a technical or academic challenge, it is also an ethical responsibility, one that concerns how we relate to the past, how we act in the present, and how we envision the future. I would also like to thank you all once again for being here, for your commitment, and for the contribution to this sharing space of reflection and exchange. I hope today's discussions will inspire new connections, collaborations, and ways of thinking that extend well beyond this forum. Thank you very much, and I wish us all a meaningful and productive day. Ahora le doy la palabra al decano de la Facultad de Arquitectura.
Les prometo que voy a intentar ser breve, porque está claro que esta presentación formal no es el objeto de hoy, pero a las autoridades presentes, a Kate, al alcalde y a todos quienes nos acompañan, a nombre de la Universidad Finis Terrae, de la Vicerrectoría de Investigación, Creación Artística y Doctorado y de la Facultad de Arquitectura y Diseño, reciban la más cordial bienvenida. Insisto, no quiero quitarles mucho tiempo, por lo que sí me gustaría comentarles algunas cosas. Resulta interesante este encuentro en torno a la protección y gestión del patrimonio, sobre todo de aquellos patrimonios tan sensibles como lo es Cerro Unita y el geoglifo del Gigante de Tarapacá, debido a los atributos que poseen, pero también a su ubicación e importancia para las comunidades locales en el norte grande de nuestro país. Este encuentro está en línea con algunos importantes hitos que se han desarrollado en el país en materia de educación y gestión patrimonial, como lo fue la publicación de la Política de Educación Patrimonial, en 2024-2029, que precisamente está orientada a desarrollar diversas estrategias en conjunto con las comunidades para conservar y valorar los patrimonios, entre otros aspectos relevantes. Por otra parte, algunos años de vigencia tiene ya el Plan Nacional de Infraestructura Patrimonial, que en este esfuerzo mancomunado entre diferentes subsecretarías, pero liderado por el Ministerio de las Artes, las Culturas y el Patrimonio, pretende responder a las diversas necesidades territoriales, impulsando la construcción y o habilitación de infraestructuras para fomentar el desarrollo en el ámbito patrimonial a nivel nacional. Estos ejemplos anteriores dan cuenta de que la educación, la protección y la gestión en materia patrimonial es algo que se ha ido instalando con fuerza en la agenda pública, y este encuentro está en total sintonía con ello, sobre todo por la gran cantidad de expositores y expositoras que desde diversas disciplinas e instituciones y de diferentes lugares del mundo aportan significativamente a este debate. Este proyecto, en particular el Gigante Vestido, nos invita a repensar las definiciones. Primero, patrimonio en sus múltiples formas posibles y hasta dónde es capaz de extenderse el concepto. ¿Qué limita, precisa o constituye un patrimonio? Es una pregunta muy vigente ante el riesgo que, en la amplitud, el término comience a diluirse. Luego también, museo. ¿Qué es un museo? Lo mismo con consumo, con moda, con transporte, con territorio y sostenibilidad. Y la última cuestión es ahora, desde la función de la facultad, de una facultad compleja, es que el gigante, paradójicamente, debe crecer y no poco. Es una obra que invita a reflexionar y levanta la mano, pero tiene el desafío de incidir desde la generación de conocimiento y entrar en la esfera pública. Nuestra facultad entiende las prácticas creativas como un paso para la innovación social, cultural y territorial. Por tanto, los invito y desafío entonces a anticipar y soñar esos futuros posibles. Espero realmente que tengan una magnífica y fructífera jornada. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí.
Good morning to all our colleagues gathered here in this room in Santiago, and a warm welcome to our international community joining us from every time zone. It is wonderful to be here at this hybrid event. As chair of ICOM-CC, the International Committee for Conservation, it is my privilege to open this international forum on the protection and conservation of archaeological heritage in open landscapes. This gathering represents a unique convergence of institutional expertise, academic research, and cultural activism. Archaeological heritage compasses the material traces of past human activity, sites, structure, rock art, geoglyphs, and field systems, whose significance lies not only in their scientific value, but in the cultural meanings, identities, and living practices they continue to inspire. Around the world, this heritage is increasingly exposed to complex risk landscapes, climate variability, accelerated land use change, extractive pressures, and gaps in policy. Open-air sites are especially vulnerable because of their fabric and context depends entirely on the integrity of the surrounding landscape and sustained community stewardship. For more than half a century, ICOM-CC has acted as a global guardian of heritage ethics. Through our 21 specialized working groups, we define the standards for how our shared history is protected. Today, we focus on the collective intelligence on a distinct class of heritage, geoglyphs. These large-scale grand markings rely on subtle surface contrasts and topographical settings, raising specific challenges for documentation, visitor management, and long-term governance. In Chile, the Andean North hosts emblematic ensembles that serve as an instructive laboratory for our field. The Tapacara region concentrates iconic cases such as the geoglyphs of the Pintados with over 450 figures, and is Centro Unita, the home of the giant of Tarapacá, an anthropomorphological figure which is approximately 86 meters tall. These sites are all at the front line of discussing in situ conservation in a hyper-arid environment. The management of motorised traffic, the urgent need for education of responsible visitation. At the heart of our debate today is a stark contrast. We have a 1,200-year-old masterpiece of ancient spiritual significance, a symbol of culture that understood how to leave a trace that transcends time. In painful contrast, a few kilometres away, in Alto Hospice, and we have the mayor here today to welcome this session, we see traces of our own era. Clothing cemeteries, where over 60,000 tons of discarded textiles are dumped annually. This is the crisis of disposable encroaching upon the eternal. It requires us to look beyond traditional museum walls and into an open landscape. Today we explore the project El Gigante Vestido. This initiative, born here at the Universidad Finis Terrae, with the wonderful participation of Andreas Echeverria and Victoria Garcia, who you just heard from, uses waste that threatens the desert to recreate its most sacred icon. And next week we will open the actual exhibition in the desert area. Through 5 rigorous phases of experimentation, students and faculty have moved from a 36 by 36 grid to a full-scale color contrast testing. This is not just art, it is a laboratory for conservation. By experimenting with these materials, we are developing the monitoring protocols and site management tools necessary to support the National Monuments Council and build a robust case for UNESCO World Heritage protection. To guide this transition from debate to action, we are joined by a panel of distinguished international experts, all ICOM-CC members. Terry Little, Andrew Thorne, and David Cohen, who you will hear for shortly. For this morning, we share knowledge. This afternoon, we will continue on-site here in Santiago to move into breakout groups to define a future approach, a roadmap that ensures the giant of Tarapacha is not just remembered, but actively protected for the next 1,000 years. The ancient inhabitants of Tarapacha understood that their time on earth was fleeting, but the knowledge that they left behind was meant to pass through generations. Let us ensure that the work we do today honors that legacy. I will now invite our first speaker to the stage and welcome the debate. So our first speaker is Andrew Thorne. Andrew Thorne is a representative art care and works both in France and Australia. He is a fine art conservator specializing in stone and polychromy. Andrew's work encompasses preservation strategies for Indigenous Australian heritage and the management of vast archaeological sites covering 1,000 square kilometres. Andrew today will talk about managing cultural landscapes, respect and custodianship. And Andrew, please take the floor and share your screen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. Where am I? Okay, thanks, Kate. Welcome, everybody. If I say buenos dias now, I've exhausted my entire Spanish vocabulary, and I apologize that I'm going to be speaking in Australian.
We are seeing the presenter mode. I mean, I'm seeing the presenter mode. So, sorry, I don't know if everybody has got the same problem.
Okay, what have I done there? I'll just have to go back out again. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, I just wanted to know if everybody had the same problem or only me.
Yeah, now I'm lost. I've lost my place. It was working before. I don't know what's happened now.
No, Andrew, it's still in presenter mode. So also you need to go to the display settings at the top of the screen.
Yeah, okay, and unclick. I'll try now. Is that changed?
No, we don't see anything yet. We're seeing your
What's
desktop.
happened? It was working perfectly before. I don't know what's happened now.
It was indeed.
It happened to me in Brazil as well, so don't worry.
No change?
Now we're seeing your slides.
Okay, great. My talk is in two parts. The first one is really just an introduction to my experiences dealing with cultural landscapes. And the second part will be looking at my perceived issues related to El Gigante and how other examples in other places have dealt with those issues. And I have to point out straight away that my observations are entirely naive in the sense that I've not been to the site and I'm only talking from what I can pick up from images and the internet.
Sorry, Andrew.
So my fundamental question with large landscapes is, can we actually do anything? And my answer obviously is that yes, you can. But they're not doing things in the traditional sense. I've spent a lot of time being involved in the mural.
Andrew, sorry, I need to mute you. We're still not seeing your slides. No, this is... No. We get reverb. Andrew, press play again. Otherwise, I have your PowerPoint presentation on my screen, so I can play your slides for you. And Andrew, you have to unmute yourself because I muted you rudely.
Okay, yes, if you run the slides, Kate, I think there might have been a slight change, but that doesn't at all matter.
No. So just stop sharing your screen, and then I can share my screen.
I thought I had.
Maybe I can...
If you can turn me off, because I've got a strange... hold on. Yeah.
So that should be working now, I think.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. So you've got, I'm looking at Terry's presentation.
Oh, yes, wrong one, sorry. We'll get there eventually.
So I'm just going to run through several examples of my experience largely from Australia, but in other places as well. And then, as I mentioned, it will then branch out into addressing issues specific to the Atacama situation. Are we set to go, Kate?
We're getting there. There we go.
Oh, okay. No.
There we go.
Okay. So if you can just click. And just tap again. So this first example is coming from Uluru in the centre of Australia. And I'm just going to focus on this a little bit because I was drawn to this place professionally to work on rock paintings, and around the base of this site there are 92 painted sites. But in wanting to understand what the cause of degradation was, I did a study of the basically of the whole rock. And it's really to illustrate the fact that the problems themselves are often much bigger than the cultural component that we're dealing with. And what we're looking at on the screen at the moment, in the top screen, is a mapping of the moisture distribution of this shelter. You can see a colleague standing at the right. He's probably 2 meters above ground level. And what that dot pattern tells me is that there's very little moisture at ground level and higher moisture as you go up into the top of the shelter. And in the bottom image, it's the salt distribution, and it really overlays on top of the moisture to show that there is an uneven distribution of salt, but that the green areas, for example, are very low in salt, and they are prominent bulges in the surface. So they're not eroding as rapidly as other areas. So that was the first study in this case. Next slide, Kate. That was the first study to understand the nature of this shelter formation. And just click again. And what I found was that the concentration of saline water was coming from above, not from the ground upwards. So the formation of these shelters, the shape of the shelters, is entirely due to water percolating down through the rock. And this is in one of the driest parts of Australia. Next slide. So this is the site just at the bottom of the rock, looking from the, I think from the west. Next slide. So when rain falls on top of the rock, keep going, it'll just not only percolate down, rather run down the surface, forming all of these eroded striations, but if you go to the next one, you have pooling of water on the top of the rock as well, and it's this pooling water that seeps into the rock and then percolates out. Just next slide. And here you can see a water hole at the base of the rock. This photograph was taken 6 months after the last rainfall. And you can see that it's still flowing. And where the water's flowing from is just around about this little green bush about halfway up. It's coming out of a crevice in the rock at that particular point, illustrating the fact that you've got water coming into the rock and then seeping through the rock and emerging at these erosion places. Next slide. And this is just click again. You can see this photograph was taken when it had actually just rained, but if you now just click again, Kate, if you look in at this point, you can see water is emerging through a crevice and forming these salts on the surface of this rock. Okay, next slide. Just click again and again. And the study here was not just a one-off study taken over a year or 3 years or whatever, but we looked at the sort of paleoclimatic impact of the erosion pattern. And you can see in the two images, or there's now one image mainly visible, that you have two forms of erosion. You have this sort of honeycomb weathering in sort of tenuous veins on the surface, and then a much more rapid erosion behind that. And those two erosion patterns really reflect the changing climate that occurred particularly over the last 15,000 years, where you had a very dry climate forming this sort of honeycomb weathering, and then as the climate became wetter, you get a more accelerated erosion on this surface. Next slide. So just to continue my interest in studying natural surfaces, I'm now turning to some rock paintings in northern Australia, in the tropics of Australia. Next slide. And press again. Okay, so what I observed at this particular location, or rather not just observed, but you'll notice on the image on the right-hand side, there is a wire going up onto the surface of the painting. And what I recorded there was a difference in moisture content in one of the pigments only over a period of a day or two. And that led to a study of understanding how natural pigmentation on rock surfaces is very much influenced by hygroscopic absorption. The stability of a lot of paintings in tropical Australia, the stability of those paintings is very much determined by the nature of the pigments. Next slide. And my experiences are not entirely confined to rock art or stone. In fact, I've been involved in this particular modern artwork. It's called Inside Australia by a reasonably well-known English sculptor, Anthony Gormley. It's an installation of stainless steel objects, 52 altered figures spread out across this salt lake. Next slide. And my role in this particular case was to develop a management system for the museum, who were the official owners of this quite significant modern installation. And so that was a case of going out and looking at the objects, spending a week surveying each of the objects, mapping and presenting a management system to the museum so that they could then pick up whatever technology was necessary to be able to monitor these objects on an annual basis. Next slide. Okay, we'll keep going. And this is set in a landscape not dissimilar to the Atacama in the sense that it's in a region of Western Australia that's dominated by these dry, generally dry salt lakes. And next slide. And this is just a closer view of the area where these objects are installed. And one of Anthony Gormley's conceptual ideas was that people walking between the sculptures would eventually draw a pattern on the surface of the salt lake, obviously only visible from satellites or from Google Earth. So that was an important conceptual component of his work, which of course we had no ability to control. But it is the impact of tourism that has added to the value of this object. Next slide. Just jump to the next one as well. This is an interesting study. It takes up about 4 hectares. This is all created by one particular artist starting in 1935, a sculptor who installed around about 90 artworks. And he also regenerated the bush here. And as times progressed, those trees that he planted, which are reaching close to 100 years old now, are beginning to threaten the sculptures. They're beginning to drop limbs, and these very brittle ceramic sculptures are being affected by that. And I did among many other things, I did a statement of significance for this place where I emphasized the fact that in the mind of the creator of these artworks, the trees themselves would be considered more important than his artworks. His artworks were there to reflect the land, and when there was a discussion about removing trees to protect the artworks, I emphasized that would not be in the wishes of the artist, who had been deceased for a number of years. Next slide. This rock art site is just illustrating an important issue. If we now just jump to the next one. This is all that exists at this site. A couple of hand stencils set in this eroded shelter at the edge of a creek. And my main role there was to go and study the condition of those paintings and the site in general. And that led, in this case, I'll only pick out one salient point here, that led to a recommendation on my part that the Aboriginal community should acquire this land. And I set them up with the owner, who I knew through another project. And I'd been told by him that he was going to sell the land. So I set up this real estate deal where I got the Aboriginal community to go to funding and come back and purchase this land. So it's probably the first time in Australia that land has been acquired. The protection of the land has been achieved through a standard private acquisition process. Next slide, Kate. here in Hong Kong, I was called in to study, along with several other, or three other researchers, to look at about 9 engravings along the coast of Hong Kong. And the only thing I want to say here is that I was particularly concerned about the heaviness of the infrastructure at this particular site. And these engravings were supposedly put on the sea edge to appease the sea gods. And clearly the sea god listened to my recommendations, because I think about a year later, there was a massive storm that just completely erased all of this infrastructure from this site, which made adopting my recommendations that much easier for the government of Hong Kong. Next slide. And here in a site in New Zealand, if we can perhaps, it's a very important site because it contains these carvings of about 40 canoes. It's considered very highly important to the Maori people. Next slide. It sits in a volcanic lava flow, or in fact 2 of them. The lower one is a little bit softer. And if we just jump to the next slide. One of my roles, my first role was to look at the physical condition of the site, but my main role was to actually make recommendations on how much land should be given back to the Ngāti Manawa, who are one of the Maori tribes that associate with this place. And it led to me having to look at probably about 6 different impacts, including tourism. You can see it's set in a commercial forest, and it has a busy road running beside it. And when I first went to the meeting, the statement I made, which rather shocked the government people, was that I was there to help the Ngāti Manawa get their land back. Government people found that a little bit affronting, and I said, look, it's absolutely important that to protect this site, you must re-engage the Ngāti Manawa with their cultural places. And it led to, the first ever for any report I've ever written. The Minister for Heritage read the report, said he enjoyed it, and about 6 months after the report was ratified, the 20 hectares that I recommended was set aside to be protected around the site, and they then gave back much more land. Next slide. So I now want to begin talking about the Atacama, and particularly the land around El Gigante, and what I know of heritage protection in that general region. I know, for example, that on the World Heritage List there are many churches that have been recorded, in other words, colonial heritage. Next slide. And this map just plots out both national parks with an N along the sort of on the right-hand edge of the site, and then we've got the Inca roadway at the top, and the Humberston and Santa Laura saltpeter works down just below Tarapaka. So as far as I know, they're the only 2 World Heritage Sites around Tarapaka. And I've marked in Tilavice as well to just record that. Next slide, Kate. Oh yeah, just keep going. So that's, we've gone, just jump back. No, okay, just stop there. So this is, I saw this photograph before I knew that it was part of the World Heritage nominated site, and I thought, wow, that is an amazing structure. And I thought that when you think of Tarapaka or Tilavice as being objects from 1,000 years ago, I'm sure that in 1,000 years' time we will look with marvel at these sorts of structures as well. So it is good that that's been classified. But what's significant in this region is that we have, let's say, Spanish material classified. We've got Inca culture classified, but nothing of the Atacameño people's culture. Next slide. And I'm just now going to look at the 3, I think there are 3 significant impacts that I have seen here. The first one is tourism, and I just use this slide to start with because this particular type of arrangement that's clearly been done in recent times by visitors disturbs me greatly when the geoglyph itself is made up of arranged stones. I find it very unsettling that you have tourists coming along and arranging stones and creating confusion about what are the values of this place. Next slide. And when I look at the site overall, and keep in mind this is one of, is it 5,000 similar registered places in the Atacama? This is a typical scenario where you have, let's say, undisciplined tourist facilities. You've got what appears to me to be stone guards along between the road and the engravings, but for me the road is way too close. And you'll see, if you looked at this quite closely, you'll see that there are actually vehicle tracks running up the slope of that engraved area, running up towards the main El Gigante himself. If we just jump to the next slide. Oh, there are the vehicle tracks. And then to the northeast of the site, not that far from, just over the hill from, just over the crest from the main figure, you have these, I've just marked these circles, which may be original features, but when you look further east again from here, you see circles that, to me, look clearly like vehicle, what we call in Australia, donuts. People in vehicles just making circles on the earth, and you can see vehicle tracks connecting them. So there's a certain amount of confusion as well about the way that people interact with cultural sites. They can mimic them in many ways, and that diminishes them as well. And there are things that really need to be controlled. Next slide. This is looking at Canyon de Chelly in Arizona, where I spent a week many years ago. And one of the things, apart from I wasn't working at this particular location, but one of the impressive things I noticed in Canyon de Chelly is that the only access into that canyon is that you pay, at that time, which is a long time ago, in the late 80s, early 90s, I can't remember the date. At that time, you paid $50 to jump on the back of a troop carrier. You were taken in by a Navajo guide, and you only left the vehicle when the Navajo guide determined that it was appropriate to do so. And there was complete control. Everybody had a fantastic experience. The Navajo are not the constructors of this particular building, but they occupied the canyon themselves for a long time. And so you had tourism contributing, $1,000 per truckload of visitors. That went to the Navajo people. They guided, they had jobs, and the sites were protected and monitored every second of the time that tourists were in this canyon. We just jump to the next slide. This is a cemetery in Tasmania in Australia where I worked for over 20 years. And when I first went there, it was completely unguided wandering through the cemetery. People could just wander through these stones, which were very fragile. Next slide, Kate. So that's the island just on towards the right-hand side of the slide. And just press again. So tourists would come out in a ferry, land on the island, and just walk around. And what I did in my recommendations were that I noticed that the ferry journey was very popular with tourists coming to the main convict settlement. And most people went on the boat for the sake of going on a boat ride. They didn't particularly want to go to the cemetery. And so I made a recommendation that there should be two types of boat rides, one for people just to sit on the boat and have a harbour cruise, and the other one where people deliberately chose to go and visit the cemetery. And I suggested that there should be a small surcharge for that as a disincentive. And that worked incredibly well. The numbers of visitors to the island dropped to 20% of previous numbers, and the income from those 20% was somewhere around about $150,000, which was more than enough to pay for the preservation of the stones. So these are two examples of where tourism can be used to great advantage. You're not excluding people, and they know that they're contributing to the preservation of the heritage. And that's a very, very important message. It's a very important structural change to make, and a very important message to send to tourists that they are part of the preservation process. Next one. So now I'm just going to look at the mining situation in the Atacama. These two sort of, I don't know what you call them, those brown fan-shaped things are what I imagine are part of the saltpeter. It's not the, I imagine that they are the same mining process as what appears at the Humberston saltpeter site, a very similar thing. But if we can just now advance the slide, Kate, and look into that central area, you'll see that between those two mines you have, if you spend a bit of time, you'll see that there are engravings along the bottom edge of the clear ground. And also up the top you have this sort of radiating patch up there. And note in particular the number of vehicle tracks that cut straight through. There are a lot of mine pits, different type of mining. There's lots of those little pock marks in that plain area are mines. And then if we just go one more slide, I think we zoom up a little bit closer. And so you can see here a detail where you've got roadways just cutting straight through those geoglyphs. And I'm sure those tracks are very old. I doubt very much whether that's current activity. Somebody might say no, they're in current use and used regularly. But that's a major problem that needs to be rectified as well. We can just go to the next slide. So I'm just now going to look at Tilavice. It's 55 kilometres northwest of. I've inverted this so we're now looking to the south rather than to the north. And all I want to say here is that apart from the inevitable tracks and so on, this little herd of llamas is quite disturbed by two high-powered electricity lines. That one there is only 20 metres from the nearest geoglyph. And the one down on the left-hand side is also about a similar distance. That is just far too intrusive to be acceptable in a preservation of that landscape. You would ideally want to have these sorts of infrastructures. I know it's not going to be good news for a government to say, or an electricity company, move your line. It's extremely expensive. But Uluru, where we began, the government spent $50 million to relocate a road away from one individual women's site that was considered very important to them. So if a government has the will, they will always find a solution. If we can move on, okay. And mining's not unique, of course, to the Atacama, or it's all over the place. And my current project, my main research project on rock art at the moment is this particular set of sites. There are over 1 million engravings of the type that you see here in an area of around about 1,000 square kilometres. And I'm studying these engravings at the micron scale. This imaging device records images that can read details at about 30 microns. But just advance one more. But this landscape is, so there was a change. This landscape is dominated by industry. And if we just now jump to the next one, Kate. And you can see in the foreground, you can see rocks that have engravings on them. And just behind them, you have this massive, very impressive flame-throwing demonstration. So this project is not excluded from mining. But what is important here is that the mining industry is paying, in US dollar terms, around about $20 million for this research project over 5 years and continuing. So industry has in some ways reluctantly. They haven't volunteered. They've been obliged to contribute to this project, but industry, like tourism, is paying its way in terms of preserving the cultural heritage that it's impacting. And if we can just now go one more, it might be the end even. Just click once more, okay? And once more. Just keep going, I think. No, just go back. Sorry, go back. Just for those two images, that'll be fine. And just, yep. So the final issue I want to cover is the role of government itself. I went online to see what documents, what is the heritage legislation for Chile and how is El Gigante and the Atacama in general protected under government legislation. And I have to say straight away, I'm sure it does exist, but I couldn't find it online. But I found this document, the title at the top, and I did have highlighted a couple of critical points here. But in this particular paragraph, what you see is an emphasis on making sites available for tourism. And there's even right at the very end, in the second last line, it has their cultural traditions through sustainable tourism. Well, we all know that sustainable tourism, tourism of any sort, sustainable or not, is not really connecting to cultural traditions. That is a relationship that has to be built in other ways. But it's absolutely vital that those cultural traditions and the Atacameño and the ancestors of the people who created these landscapes are in the driving seat of how this site is used as a sustainable tourism destination. And last slide now, Kate. Sorry, I'll probably run way over my time. Keep going. We'll get straight to the final document. So it's always a danger when you're speaking from, a country that is if you look at the development of countries, the gross domestic product, whatever it is, with America at the top, China number 2, Chile number 46. It's always difficult to talk about Chile when you start giving examples from anything above 46. So what I did was to look at, for various reasons, I looked at what legislation is in Namibia, western side of a country, desert. And Namibia is ranked about 125 or something on the GDP scale. And Namibia does have a very firm National Heritage Act developed specifically because of the impact from mining. I shouldn't say specifically, but looking at the impact of mining and saying we need to have very strict controls over how the country is run and how our heritage is protected. So I'll end it there. Just last slide, Kate. And just click on a bit. And maybe one more.
Yeah, that's it, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really illuminating, and it was wonderful to have these parallels drawn. And don't worry about the time. I think we've got enough time. If anybody has questions for Andrew, please post them in the chat, and we can circle back to them after our third speaker today. So thank you again, Andrew. Do stay on the line. And let me introduce our next speaker. Maybe I can put my camera on for a second. So our next speaker is David Cohen. David Cohen is the Associate Professor at the Laboratory for Arts and Heritage, LEAP, at the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. David has 20 years of experience in preventive conservation and research, and is a consultant to UNESCO, ICOM, and a coordinator of the ICOM-CC Preventive Conservation Working Group. He has published extensively on risk management and heritage valuation, and David will talk about global challenges and risk management for rock art. So David, please can I ask you to take over and give your presentation?
Yes, I will share my screen. Thank you, Kate. Are you watching my screen there?
Yes, we see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for all who organized this forum. Mis amigos de Chile y a mis colegas, un abrazo y gracias por la invitación. And I will talk about a little bit about risk management because risk management on the last decade, it's an approach that is leading all the preventive conservation work. It was based on a research made by ICOM and other institutions like the Canadian Conservation Institute, and the point of the methodology is to improve the process of decision making under the perspective of analyzing risk, not only what you think it's going to happen, but to organize a little bit through the analysis of risks. This is important because it is based on an international norm, which is called risk management. It's a generic technical norm, and it's based on this risk management cycle, meaning that if you're going to do risk management, you have to follow these steps. And for these steps, one of the most important things is what we call the knowledge of risks, which is the identification, analysis, and evaluation, which is a comparison between the risk magnitudes. And this is important because it certainly improves the whole process of understanding deterioration processes and the effects from the hazards. Because there is a lot of dangers that affects objects, and we have these 10 agents of deterioration proposed by the CCI. The point for these 10 agents are specifically to help for the identification of risks, to organize what can be wrong with the site. And as I said, there are a lot of hazards, earthquakes, tourism, wildfires, floods, administration problems, the lack of, resources, financial resources. So there is a lot of hazards, and there is a lot of adverse effects as well, which is what we call deterioration, actually. But to join these two, the 10 agents are like a needle, because you have a lot of values on the hazard side, and you have a lot of effects, but you only have 10 agents. So it helps you to identify risk and to better analyze risk, and of course to focus your vision and not on the hazard part or in the deterioration part. So it's really helpful to organize, the thinking about what is going to be wrong. As for the rock art, I would like to start presenting some of the impacts of these 10 agents, physical forces and fire. And sometimes risks are a probability. So if you buy a lottery ticket, you face the risk of winning the lottery. So risks are not always bad. And in this case, an earthquake reveals in 2020 in Mexico some rock art, because the rock moves on and it shows and appears this sort of picture. So it's a good risk. But sometimes it's not so good. And you have, from physical forces, from this perspective of physical forces, you have erosion, abrasion, this sort of problems on the surface of the rocks. So it's very common in many sites because of the wind, the impact of the pollutants of the environment, to have these chirps and flakes and this sort of deterioration processes. But you can analyze this from the perspective of physical forces. And also, always the damage that earthquakes produced on rock art sites. As for the fires, I have this case here in Colombia, which is a town known as Bogotá. It's near to Bogotá, which is the main capital of the country. And they have this group of, it's like a sort of park, you know. And in this park, they have these paintings, rock paintings on these rock formations. And they're very beautiful, but they have fire problems, you know, because people go there and visiting especially on the Sundays, and they just have their fires to cook, you know, to do the barbecue and to relax on Sunday near to this work of arts. So it's part of the use of the site, you know. It's hard to control this because people want to use these sites. The problem is how it use it. And, you know, having bonfires near, it makes pollutants and problems with the surface, you know, to accumulate carbon on the surface. So these sort of measures are pretty much simpler, and they have an impact on this sort of deteriorations and problems. As for relative humidity and temperature and pests, of course, one of the problems is the climate change. You know, this is an index from the climate risk, and the top most affected countries in the world about climate change, even if some politicians are denying the climate change right now, but it's real and it's here. And Chile is it's also part of this problem. And in this case, I'm showing one of a newspaper about the impact of climate change destroying rock paintings in Sulawesi, Indonesia. So in this case, the rise of the temperature produce, you know, these flakes or chirping of the surface. And because of the stone moves with the temperature, and it changes its dimension as any other material, and the paint layer is not so flexible. So this means that it will fall down. It's falling down due to the temperature change. As for Chile, it's the number 16 on a list of most affected countries. You see this map from Climate Risk Index, which is an organization that evaluates how much is the risk of climate change for countries. And if you see, most of the risks are in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, because we have oceans, we have coastal problems, and one of the main issue beside the rise of the temperature is the rise of the sea level. And this is important because many of the rock art sites are located near coastal. So it's really a problem we have to address. And I said Chile is the number 16 on this list. So it's really on the first 20 top of most affected countries, as you may see for the color in this map. So relative humidity and temperature control leads to, mold growth. It's one of the most recurrent problems for rock art. Here you see also near Bogotá, this site, we have not only mold and the lichens growing on the surface of the stone, but we have different types of lichens also on this side, which is part of Bogotá actually. We have this sort of lichens, and this is a problem because we need to understand how these organisms just interact with the stone and the components of the paintings. And it needs a lot of research, and it needs to identify these organisms in the laboratory in order to develop treatments for these organisms, because sometimes it's not only one. There is an ecological micro consortium of organisms who attack the rock or attack the paintings. So it is important to identify this and to test, scientifically test, which kind of products you can use. We're seeing here is, a little piece to see the kind of deterioration of some of these organisms. And if you see the rhizomas here growing inside the stone, they're really conducing to some sort of mechanical problems as well. And this is important as part of the research to develop, treatments for this, or even to prevent the growing of these organisms on the surface. As for these other three, the contamination of pollutants on the water, this is a map of coastal risk levels, and all the red zones are areas which are in risk of flooding. This is changing in the world right now. This is important because, as I previously said, there is a lot of archaeological sites as well as rock art sites near coastal, both from sea and for rivers. Here in Colombia, we have this project from colleagues of mine, which is called the rock art in Rio Inírida, Inírida River. They have this sort of petroglyphs, and of course they're near the river, and the problem is that the river is changing. The season of dry season of the river, which shows the art, and the elevated water due to the change of the rains on the river are changing the timing and the way we have this on show, this sort of petroglyphs. So they're documenting. This is one of the most important things to do when you know that if this process continues, will lead to the loss of this site because of the erosion of the water going up and down, and also the formation of salts. What you're watching here, it's a microphotograph of different sulfide salts, which are producing both crust on the surface, but also crust under the surface, which is more dangerous for the stones, because when salts crystallize, they expand, and they can grow 300% from when they're in solution. So the water contains pollutants, contains salts, and when they move through the stone surfaces, it produces this kind of crusts. And these crusts this is from different places here in Colombia. And the problem is recurrent in many sites of work. Also, Andrew showed us this kind of problem in Australia. And because of the water and the salts are, and I know this is very basic stuff, but it's important to know how to prevent this. Not only how to repair or restore this, because it's not the problem here, and there is not a single answer. You need to really go deep into research to know how the water interact with the stone, and which are the kind of salts. What is the solubility of this sort of salts? Because not all salts crusts are soluble the same way, and this affects the rocks, as I said, as superficial crust, but also under the surface. This is important, and this is part of thinking about a more wide plans for the management of these sort of sites, because we know we have these sort of problems, and we know that not controlling these agents of deterioration and the effect they have on these sites, it's really part of the problem. You need to prevent this from happening. Finally, I have these two different agents, dissociation and vandalism, which are for me the most problematic agents for deterioration on this kind of, heritage places and sites. As for dissociation, it's the rupture, between information and objects. You may have the information, but if you broke the link between these two, you will have dissociation, and it will lead to the loss of the objects itself. So it's called the metaphysical agent, because it's a relationship between information and objects. And just to briefly explain this, if you have this spoon and you have no information about this spoon, it is really hard for you to understand why this spoon is heritage. But if I provide this sort of information, this was the spoon which Bolivar used on 19th century from his death. This information provides or link it with the objects, make them that we look as heritage. So it's really important, not the objects themselves, but also the information they can hold, they can carry, and how we link these two things together. One problem is sometimes we don't have the information. And in rock art, this is important because in many cases, we don't know the people who made this, or the time, or the dating, or the significance of these places. Or we only understand part of the places, but not on a landscape scale or perspective, but only on the drawings, or more specific, but not the relations. So it's important to have research here. And sometimes, here in Colombia at least, there is no archaeological research around these sites. So we don't actually know many things about these places. Also, some of these have changed through time. So there are, free software like DStretch and ImageJ to provide a better vision of this sort of rock art. And this is important because if you can show them, you can better understand how these places change over time. And they actually change because we cannot be sure about the dates. And here in Colombia, the idea of documenting these sites, it's from the 19th century. It was a scientific project led by the government, and they have these records of painted stones, and from 1870 to 1884. And they have several plates like this, depicting in detail what are represented, because they have this interest from the 19th century. And they see that these are, in this case, the concept of conservation or heritage is not really developed yet, but they have this sort of conscience on how we document these places, because are important places. And these places have, a certain power for people. That's why, in the first place, people try to put some marks on these sites. And this sometimes is forgotten. Because, and I have this case here, which is really, really, pathetic about this point. It's called the Son Barren, and it's located near Bogota here in Colombia. And we have this image, which was first documented in 1924, very early in the 20th century. And we have this figure, which is very used figure for the people in this place. They use it for everything, even on tattoos. They have this image because it's a powerful image. And, it was suffering from some sort of loss of color due to the lighting, the rain and all the other agents. And in 2015, this colleague of mine, Diego Martinez, which have, I will go back. We have a Rupestre website, and which is called like that. He documented again these paintings, these important paintings, and using the D-stretch and these available tools for doing this and try to reconstruct. But in 2024, there was lost this image because somebody just put a thick layer of black painting, and it's lost. I mean, even if it is important for the people, the link between information and significance and the object is broken. And if it's broken, it leads to the loss of the object. And this is really important. I mean, how we can put together this link. Even if we have the information since the beginning of the 20th century, like in this case, it's not really protected because people, this information is for some specialists, it's not for the whole people, right? And this is one of the main problems. This is another site here near Bogota. It's the Facultad, which is a little town with this sort of stone formation. And they have, of course, indigenous pre-Columbian paintings there. And in 1915, at the beginning of the 19th century, they put these paintings of the liberal presidents there because there was they killed one of the leaders in 1915, and they want to remember all these liberals. So some artists paint also on this rock. It means that, and there is a discussion which one is heritage, which one we protect, because these have more than a century. But the point is that the sites are important for people. It was important in the past. It's important right now. That's why people want to paint on these sites. They often do. And we call it vandalism right now, as a deterioration agent. But actually, it's part of what people want to express on this site because the sites are important. And this is a problem. And there is a lot of, different perspectives how to prevent this from happening on the sites, on the rocks, on paintings, and what we really need to protect. And this is, I think, the next speaker will talk about this, the significance and values and the valorization. But for me, and I'm ending right now, the only way is to provide this information to a broader audiences, not only specialists. You need to have information, and this is research. That's why research of these sites, it's really complex and it's really important, but you need to connect the research results with the people. Because this is the only way to prevent these sort of things to happen. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you so much, David. I think you've given us a really clear pathway of how to use the agents of deterioration and risk management in the future project going further here in Chile. So thank you very much. Again, if the audience has questions for David, please put them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end of the next speaker's talk. So I would like to now introduce our final speaker. Our final speaker is Terry Little. Terry Little is from Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria in Nigeria. He is a senior lecturer in heritage management and president of the Rock Art Network. He's a former COO of the Trust for African Rock Art Tara and was recently a Getty Scholar at the Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles. Terry is also the chair of the Stichting ICOM-CC Fund that fundraises for ICOM-CC, and it is thanks to the fund's generous sponsorship that we can host this session today on Zoom. Terry, I'll hand over to you now to talk about the power of rock art, valorization and preservation in Africa. And again, I will be sharing your slides, correct? And I will act as your assistant. Thank you, Terry. So just give me a second while I push up the slides. Can you see?
I can see, but you need to go back to the first slide.
Sorry, just give me a second. Sorry, that's the end slide, isn't it? I'm giving away your
It's in the middle, actually.
It's in the middle. All right, hang on. There we go. There we go. Is that okay?
That is very okay. Thank you, Kate, for helping out with the presentation, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this forum. My presentation will start with an introduction of rock art in Africa, and then I look at two case studies regarding the challenges of conservation and use of rock art in two sites, one in Kenya and one in Nigeria. Next slide, please. I do want to look at rock art globally as well. This map needs a little bit of updating, but the figures are correct. Of the 1,248 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, 54 of them are specifically contain rock art. And perhaps it would be great to see the Tarapacá geoglyph site joining this list, which I understand is a wish shared by many in this forum today. Next slide, please. Yeah, so where is rock art in Africa? It's a huge continent. We know that there's rock art from north to south, with great concentrations through the Sahara and in southern Africa. Next slide, please. In Morocco, they comprise mainly engravings, which could be up to 5,000 years old, and include domestic and wild animals, weapons, warriors, and scenes of battles and hunting. Antelope and cattle are the most represented animals in Moroccan rock art, although elephants and rhinoceros are also common. Next slide, please. This is one image in Niger, a number of rock art sites, and I'll have a more interesting site a little bit later on. Next slide, please. In Algeria, the Tassili Niger was classified as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1982. There are more than 15,000 rock paintings and engravings in the site, dating back as far as 12,000 years. Next site, please, or next slide, please. Most of the known depictions in Somalia or Somaliland, most of the known depictions correspond to painted or engraved cattle scenes, often accompanied by human figures, dogs, and other domestic animals, although some warriors, camels, and geometric symbols are also common. These paintings are believed to be around 5,000 years old. Next slide, please. Yeah, this was the slide you were showing at the beginning, which happens to be my favorite engraving. This is in Chad, known as Nyola Dola in the local language, which can either translate it as the big ladies or the dancing maidens. But over the years, the many times that I've been back there, I'm not that convinced that these are maidens or women for that effect. These are thought to be between 5,000 and 6,000 years old. Next slide, please. The Matandus is home to some of the oldest engravings in the Sahara Desert. These are around 10,000 years old. This engraving of a crocodile is a reminder of when the Sahara was green for a period of about 8,000 years. Next slide, please. Tanzania includes many different styles and periods of rock art, the earliest of which may date back to 10,000 years, although these paintings that you're seeing are more recent. Kondoa was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2006. Next slide, please. Many of the depictions in Matobo Hills in Zimbabwe are associated with hunter-gatherers, providing a great amount of information about the social, economic, and spiritual life of these groups. This view is of a complex panel including hundreds of human figures, animals, and other unidentified objects. Next slide, please. Yeah, apart from the beauty of this engraving, the Dabus giraffe, this life-size engraving attests to the time 13,000 to 5,000 years ago when the Sahara was green. These are life-size engravings, and again, believed to be around 8,000 years old. A true masterpiece, if that's a word we can use for that. The next slide, please. So yes, rock art is amazing, impressive, but rock art is threatened. If there's one thing about rock art, true about rock art around the world, is that it's threatened by both human and natural forces. Next slide, please. We have this example of weathering in Morocco, although in some cases the rock coating can also be a preservation agent. Next slide, please. In Angola, the Chitunduhulu site, rock art is continually threatened by natural processes such as rock weathering, water damage, and exposure to sunlight, vegetation growth. Next slide, please. But there are also the impacts of animals and environmental events such as fire, floods, and earthquakes that David was talking about. Next slide, please. In Tanzania, this happens actually to be at the Kondoa World Heritage Site of Kondoa. What you see at the left is actually an example of local communities using dynamite to look. Through mythology, they believe that the rock art sites indicate where Germans hid treasures in the early 1900s. On the right is a more common example of quarrying that we see at so many sites. Next slide, please. Rock art is particularly vulnerable when there are activities related to rock art, to quarrying. The most important act of conservation at this particular site was when we managed to document the site, which was found on private property before it was destroyed and quarried for industrial purposes. Next slide, please. I think as both of the previous speakers noted, graffiti and vandalism is a common, all too common occurrence at rock art sites. These are examples from Uganda, Kenya, Chad, and Somalia, Somaliland. Next slide, please. So conservation, our premise, if I can say, when I talk about our premise, in this case, I'm talking about TARA, the Trust for African Rock Art. Push the button again, Kate. Our premise is that barriers, such as gates, fences, walls, are neither efficient, practical, or appropriate to protect or valorize most sites. Next slide, please. And click it again. So rather than those barriers, what I believe in many cases, not all cases, is that the best defense, the real barrier, is when people living on or near rock art sites. Next. If there's a spiritual, cultural link to the site. Next. And or they perceive economic or social benefits from the site. Next slide, please. So I get a little bit into those issues in a case study, two case studies, about 5,000 kilometers distant, Nigeria in West Africa, and Kenya in East Africa. Next slide, please. In Kenya, I'm talking about the project on Mfangano Island in Lake Victoria. This is a project managed by TARA in collaboration with the Community Museum of Abasuba, which took on the responsibility of protecting the numerous rock art and painting sites believed to be between 500 and 1,300 years old. Next slide, please. When the director, the curator of the site, Jack Obonyo, approached us in 2007, this was a situation in the area. There was very limited access to the island. It is an island in the middle of Lake Victoria, so no roads, no bridges. It was an HIV hotspot, limited access to education. Of a population of 18,000 on the island, and now that's around 28,000, only 10 primary and secondary schools, limited communications, limited technology, no electricity unless you had your own generator, and of course a lack of job opportunities for the growing youth population on the island. Next slide, please. So what was TARA to do in the face of that situation? But fortunate for us, the project that we defined, the Community Rock Art Project, promoting responsible rock art tourism, and that area was made possible because Western Kenya became a priority for development of tourism, including a grant of around $250,000 from the European Union to undertake our project. That project was made up of 5 components: awareness, conservation, promotion, infrastructure, and all of those leading to improved livelihoods of the communities. Next slide, please. When I first visited this island in the middle of Lake Victoria, I thought it was one of the most beautiful places, not just in Kenya, but in Africa. But in terms of hospitality, there were only 2 options: very high-end, expensive resorts, or for adventure tourism, tented campsites for adventure tourism, nothing in the middle. But all of the tourism bodies that we reached out to were excited and interested to be engaged in our project. Next slide, please. One thing that we understood in terms of promotion, it would not be to our benefit just to look at the rock art. We really had to look at all of the natural and cultural offerings in that area to make a package, to come and visit Abasuba, come and visit Mfangano Island. Next slide, please. In terms of infrastructure, the most important aspect was the construction of the gateway to the rock art of Abasuba heritage. So one building host a museum and a meeting area for the community elders. And the other building was conceived as a community center, one that could generate income for the community, and another space just where the community, where it could be the focus of community meetings and gatherings. Go ahead, next slide. So if I look at the achievements, so we're now about 20 years from the launch of that project, and one of my goals this year is, I think this is a good time to go back and look and really evaluate the success or failure of the different aspects of this project. But I think I can say with some confidence there were achievements of higher awareness and appreciation of the heritage, not just by the local community, but by the entire region, the entire country. Pride in the Abasuba language, which is the local language, which happens to be on the UNESCO list of endangered languages. The museum is indeed a center of social and cultural aspects of community life and employment. So that means about 10 local people employed full-time at the museum or as guides at the sites, and we estimate around 100 other people in ancillary services, driving boats, growing food, fishing for the restaurant, and so on. Next slide, please. There are 4 main sites on the island. As an entry fee to the site, you pay 2 prices. You pay, one goes to the guide, and then one fee goes to that community, and they decide what to do with that income. So at one of those particular sites, they decided to create a kindergarten. There was no kindergarten on that side of the island. For the high-end tourism and airstrip, we worked closely with the Minister of Tourism, Minister of Immigration to create an airstrip and an immigration office on the island. In terms of infrastructure, apart from the museum and community center, we built piers, which of course we needed for tourist and visits, but are of course used also by fishermen and community transportation around the island and between the island and the mainland. Telecommunications, we worked with Safaricom, the largest telecom provider in Kenya, to put a mast at one end of the island where there was no communication. For us, it served to connect the guides so we could say, okay, there's a group coming over now. But of course, that mast serves an entire population on that part of the island. Next slide, please. So why does it work in Suba? I'm not seeing the wording there, but I'll just click again and see if words pop up. If not, I can just...
Terry, we can see them on the screen. We can see it on the screen. It's in light text, but I can see it.
Okay. So why does it work in Suba? One, it's because it's community-driven, although the project was led and managed in many ways by Tara, but it was really, we engaged the community from the start and to this moment. It is community-led with the benefits shared by the community. The founder, Jack Obonyo, of course, his interest and commitment to the project meant a great deal at the beginning. He is now a member of the local state government, so continuing to ensure that the site receives the kind of support and contributions that help it move along. The support of the Council of Elders, networking of local stakeholders, certainly critical. And then the museum revenues, even though they're modest, they're more or less enough to keep the place going. Next slide, please. So now let's move to the other case study of community engagement in a project. And this is in Cross River State in West Africa. Cross River is in the in the southeast corner of the country. And here we're talking about a different type of rock art. We're talking about engraved monoliths. Next slide, please. Since 2017, Tara has worked with a number of universities, University of Calabar, Ahmadu Bello University, Factum Foundation, and have documented over 3,000 monoliths in over 30 sites. However, only 2 of those sites are under the direct protection of the National Commissions for Museums and Monuments. Next slide. In some communities, the monoliths still play an important role in the cultural practices in terms of honoring and praising the spirits of the elders, and other sites used for initiation rites. Next slide, please. Here we have an elder woman painting carved channels in one of the Alok monoliths. And this is, I think, something that the previous speakers also alluded to, how rock art, how it maintains its values over time. And it's one of the challenges illustrated here is finding that balance between use and conservation. My own perspective is that use, and that is when cultural values are being promoted, can often save the heritage from oblivion. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest threats to the sites is when a highway was put through the area, and many of the villages and communities moved their centers to be close to the roads and left their monolith sites sort of abandoned. And these then became, were in the middle of what became agricultural land. And here again, another very difficult challenge. No one should ever have to make the choice of whether to save their heritage or put food on their table. Next slide, please. We know that outreach is an important component of any conservation project. We created one exhibition, a small exhibition at the local Alok Community Center, and then on the right another exhibition at my university, Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, which was entirely conceived and curated by a group of 20 students in the Department of Archaeology. So really just raising that level of awareness at all different levels. Next slide, please. Here I'm just going to address the image on the left. We know that outreach is an important, the change of governments has been both a blessing and a curse. Donald Duke was governor of Cross River State from 1999 to 2007, during which time there was a large investment in the promotion of heritage and tourism infrastructure, including the recreation of giant monoliths in a roundabout in a park in the state's capital of Calabar. Sadly, the current administration tore down these monoliths a few years ago, and in its place put a statue of Jesus surrounded by a flock of sheep. Next slide, please. So what are some outstanding issues that have come? This is a more recent project, but still we've been working on it for about 10 years. Apart from the limited cultural use of the few of the sites, we're still asking ourselves, how do communities benefit from these monoliths? We know that the tourism options are very limited. Access, you have to get to Lagos and then a flight to Calabar, and then you have a 4-hour, not easy drive to ICOM where you spend the night, and then it's still another 2-hour drive to the site. So access and unfortunately security are issues that are challenges. And we know that always, present exploitation should avoid exhausting its future use. Next slide. What we have learned at Tara, and I think it's shared probably lessons from many, is that communities know what they want. So you need to build on that. Sites and settings will vary from place to place, and projects cannot be a one-size-fits-all. They have to be designed for those sites. Monitoring and evaluation need to be important aspects of any project, once you've kicked them off, but even after the project funding is completed, still looking for ways to monitor and evaluate those. Heritage conservation projects have to address the economic needs. I say in communities in Africa, but I think this is all over the place. Next slide, please. And then the funding challenge, always. Funding of heritage preservation, of which rock art is generally the poor second cousin of natural and built heritage, is always going to be the lesser slice of funding, of the funding pie, compared to health, education, and security. Next slide, please. Just a few words about TAR, the Trust for African Rock Art. What does it do in terms of documentation and archive? TAR has over 60,000 images from 20 countries. 25,000 of those images can be reviewed. They're curated and with information by the British Museum. So that you have both of those websites located there. Next slide, please. TAR has benefited from partnerships, funding, and technical partnerships over the years. And I think just next slide, please. Again, just reflecting my overall message. We know, again, from my first images, rock art is powerful, but we know that rock art is also threatened. Next slide, please. Thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today in this forum, and please accept my best wishes for the success of the forum and the long-term aims that you hope to achieve. Many thanks. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Terry. We do have a few minutes still for questions. But before that, I really would like to thank all three speakers. I would like to thank Andrew for his discussion, where he's really explaining that preservation is most successful when local associations are recognized and those within the deepest connection to the place are treated as its primary custodians. David moved on to talk a little bit more about risk management and how climate change and environmental hazards impact vulnerable and often inaccessible heritage. And we just heard from Terry, who has really highlighted how to mitigate the fragility of these sites exposed to natural and human factors by working with community. So I'd like to thank all three speakers for their presentations and open up for questions not only in the chat, but also here in the room. And maybe we can ask the technician to show the image of the room, if that's possible. And for those who wish to speak in Spanish, we have a wonderful translator, Victoria, who will help facilitate that. So first, I would like to ask anybody in the audience here in Santiago if they would like to take the floor and ask a question. Any questions from the room? Oh, they're very quiet. What about online? I see there is one question from Alessandra. Would you like to present your question, or we can ask Victoria to read it out? Let me just move this to full screen. And it's a question for David. So do you want to read it out?
Alejandro is asking on the case of the covered rock with the black painting and other cases of vandalism. From your preventive conservation perspective, the signals that you could put for tourism uses on the site, could they work more as a tool of protection and education, or could it generate negative impacts to address the attention to certain vulnerable cultural elements?
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra, for the question. I think it depends. It depends on how much you know your public. As Terry beautifully showed us, community engagement implies to ask communities first. So if you're expecting on the site to have community or different sorts of people coming in, you need to design this sort of panels and exhibitions according to their needs and expectations. That will be my answer.
Thank you, David. I think that's a very clear answer. Moving on, we have 2 more questions in the chat, and we have a question from the audience online as well. So Mohammed has asked Terry, he's interested in the technical issues surrounding the dating of these rock art sites. As an archaeologist, I know for one, to do radiocarbon date, you need to find organic materials such as charcoals. And how do you sort out the sequences when rock art are superimposed on other words? How do you determine the periodization? Terry, do you have any insights into that?
How much time do we have?
Oh, I think a short answer, Terry.
I think that there's so many different ways we have to depend on to date a rock art, as you mentioned, Yao. Organic material, when it's available, is one of the easiest ways, if you want. But although that can be expensive, as you also know. So often you do have to depend on dating of associated materials, maybe you found in excavations near the rock art sites, and or looking at styles of periods. You can say, okay, we know from other investigations, we know that this style of engraving or this style of painting dates to this period of time. Throughout the Sahara, it's helpful to know about the environment. Because, for example, we know that many of the animals that are engraved or painted in the Sahara disappeared probably 5,000 years ago. So we can know that those images are probably at least 5,000 years old. So that's kind of a short answer.
Thank you, Terry. I think this is a forum and another meeting on its own to go through how to date these kind of sites. Luis Souza, you have your hand up. Do you want to take the floor?
I have a question. First of all, congratulations to the presenters and for the organization of this event. I have a question for David, because I have already commented this with Andrew. I saw in some of your pictures from Colombian rock art sites that there are some pink colors around, and they don't look like rock art. We have the same here in Brazil, and already confirmed this with Andrew. He found it. I'm studying this in Brazil now. Do you have any data about those pink stuff, that pink layer?
Yeah, thank you, Luis. It's a great question. And no, we don't.
I do.
No, yeah, but not here in Colombia, because there are several hypotheses about what is this. And it's difficult to date and to organize into time the different paintings on the rock. And this is probably one of the most important problems with this sort of, sort of art, if we can call it art at all, is that we know that some of these sites have several production times from different communities on the same places. So it's difficult to organize that and to have precise dating on each of the different stages. We have, sorry, Luis.
But it's not style. It's really a shadow. It's not painting. It's a shadow that's everywhere in several of your slides. We can talk more about this later, but it's just to call your attention to that.
Yes, and we have this sort of shadows. We know that some of them are painted. Some others are not painted, and some others are painted in different times. So this is my answer. Okay. We have these 3 hypotheses, and we probably have these different 3 scenarios here in Colombia.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And thank you. Again, I think, Luis, you should connect with the members. I know you know them personally. Yes. So, and move forward with the research there. I think is another pocket of understanding to discover as we move forward. Are there any other questions? And from the audience here in Santiago? They're all very quiet. I think we can go, we have to finish on time today. I'd love to spend more time discussing these issues with all three of our eminent speakers and our wonderful audience online. This session has been recorded, and the recording will be made available to those who participated for a short period, and we will share the link towards the end of this week, I think. But I am sure that the team here in Santiago will be back in contact with David, Terry, and Andrew. As we move forward, we will be having discussions this afternoon with roundtables in various different topics to do with tourism, to do with conservation, and other aspects. And we'll provide summaries to all of our speakers so that you're kept up to date with that. And I'd really like to finish with some words of thanks. So thank you so much to our hosts here at the Universidad Finis Terrae. It has been wonderful to be involved and to be invited as a coordinator with this. Thanks to ICOM-Chile for also their participation and for helping facilitate the event. Thank you to the team up in Alto Hospice. We're very appreciative that the mayor and dignitaries from the region have come here. Thank you also to Joanna Thiele for her contribution and for helping facilitate and connect all the pieces together. It has been amazing, and I very much appreciate this. Joanna is a former board member of ICOM-CC, so ICOM-CC is very close to her heart. And lastly, thank you to the inspiration and the idea. I'm struggling to find a word here at the moment. To Andrés Echeverria and to Victoria Garcia. Without your passion, your dedication, and your input, we wouldn't be here today. And I know that you will be driving this project forward in the future, and I wish you all the best for the inauguration of the Gigante Vestido next week. And I'm sure that we'll be posting pictures online of the wonderful celebrations as we unveil the life-size reconstruction of the giant in these textiles that have been dumped in the desert. And it's going to be a very colourful desert experience. So thank you very much, everybody. And we'll call the end to this presentation. Thank you.
Para los desafíos de un mundo en constante cambio, se necesita una formación integral. Por eso, integramos las artes y las humanidades. Aquí, la carrera comienza con un proyecto de vida. Desarrollamos el pensamiento crítico para dialogar con la complejidad. Aprendemos a comunicar ideas con impacto y creatividad. Porque los grandes problemas se abordan desde múltiples perspectivas. Se pueden elegir minors que amplían nuestra visión profesional. Fomentamos experiencias internacionales y el intercambio global, y herramientas para construir una carrera con proyección, para ser profesionales autónomos que gestionan su propia trayectoria. Formamos profesionales de excelencia, personas integrales, profesionales que transformen la realidad, con propósito, flexibilidad, interdisciplina, personas que proyectan su desarrollo hacia el bien común. Nuevo modelo formativo Finis transforma. Universidad Finis Terrae.